and welcome to another episode of Gotham Sound TV. I'm here with Glenn Sanders, and we're going to take an in-depth look at the Deva 24. Thank you for coming.
It's always a pleasure to be here, Peter.
So, Deva 24 shipping now?
Absolutely shipping now on several productions as we speak and being prepped for many, many more. Deva 24 started shipping about 2 months ago to early adapters and beta testers, and now we're in our full production and shipping to any customer that would like to have one. And we also just started shipping our Mix 16 control surface.
Awesome. So you are here to give us a fairly in-depth, what we hope is an in-depth overview of that combination. So where do we start? I guess for people that are coming to this video for the first time, and this is their first knowledge of the product, how many inputs, how many outputs, what are the specs?
Okay. First of all, we have 16 analog inputs, which are arranged as 12 mic inputs with phantom power, all with NeverClip, and we'll talk about that, as well as 4 other line level inputs. So 16 total analog. We have 24 AES inputs, and of those 24 inputs, 16 of them are AES 42. And the unit has a very, very robust power supply, so you can actually power 8 AES 42 microphones directly from the Deva 24. So yeah, I think that's a very unique thing. I mean, AES 42 microphones are gaining in popularity and offer some nice advantages over analog. So basically we are supporting 8 microphones that take up 16 AES inputs. And then there are another 8 AES inputs that are just straight AES 3 for a total of 24 AES ins.
Now, is AES 42 backwards compatible with AES 3? Can I use them if I want 24 AES inputs?
Absolutely,
AES 3 inputs?
absolutely. Okay. You can switch the AES between AES 3 and AES 42.
Great.
There's no detriment to doing that.
All right.
So all good. We do have coming out about a little after NAB the Dante interface board. And that board will allow you to input another 16 channels of audio from a Dante connection.
Wow.
Yeah, so that's an option that'll be around, it's scheduled for just after NAB, so that's where we are on that.
Fantastic. And how do I, what are my outputs?
Well, I was just going to get there.
Good.
Basically, we have 10 output buses. Those buses are on an assortment of connectors. We've got 4 XLR connectors. We have a group of TA5 connectors that have 2 channels per connection. And we also have some tip-ring sleeved 3.5 millimeter connectors, as well as an output that is also could be used as a secondary headphone output. So that's a total of 10 buses.
Wow, that is a lot of routing possibilities.
Well, that's right, yeah. I mean, when you talk about routing, you can take any one of the mixed tracks, or any input for that matter, and route them to the outputs, and you can make mixes on the output. So let's say you want to take your mix and combine that maybe with some feedback from a voice coach. You could take that and send that to an output, or take ISOs in a voice coach, or you want to take a music input and then output that as well. The nice part about the Deva, which goes back to the original Devas, is they are infinitely routable.
With that infinite possibility, though, is it complex?
No, it's ridiculously simple.
Can you show us?
Yeah, absolutely. Basically, if we take a look at the overhead view here of the unit, this is Deva 24. I might mention that it is frickin' pretty. It's got a
solid unit, yeah.
It's got a great look to it, and we'll talk about the build certainly. But if you come in here, it is a touchscreen interface, and anything you want to do, you can do as quickly as you can think. So if I want to go into track mix and I want to take, let's say, track mix number 1, and I want to route input 4, I can, let's say, route an analog input to input 4. For anyone that knows the Deva, this is just like the old Deva, where you route things pre-fader or post-fader. Okay, you also route analog or digital inputs, and you just simply touch the cross points to route them. So I just routed a pre-fader digital input to track 20. So again, as quickly as you can think about it, you can do it. In the routing menu, you also have the ability to route tone to the track. Do I want the slate mic to feed this track? Do I want what we call ISO attenuation on this track, which is part of NeverClip? Do I want a compressor on this track? So it's really very, very easy to come in here and route things. If I want to look at the output routing, I can just touch output routing, and I've got all the tracks. You see the 10 output buses, and if I want to basically just touch the track, I can come in here and I can select any number of tracks to route together onto that output. So again, very, very simple to come and route. I also have the ability to route the 4 returns onto the track as well. So yeah, so if you are getting a return from, again, let's say a voice coach, you can route that to the output so that the actor can hear that along with their own ISO track. So yeah, so again, very, very flexible in the output routing part of it. So when we go into track mix, very simply, we just come in here and I can go through all 8 tracks, and I have direct access to those tracks with the F1 through F8 button, or there's a touch button on each side of the track. I'm able to have an infinite mix of all the analog inputs, all the digital inputs, in any combination, pre-fader, post-fader, or phase inverted. So you have 8 infinitely mixable tracks. If I go back here and go into ISO routing, I have the ISO set up as tracks 9 through 24.
Okay.
Okay. These are dedicated. They are not mixable. They're simply one track, pre or post fader, that you're sending to post-production. The nice part about this is you can also have more ISO tracks, because the typical situation is you've got 1 or 2 mix tracks,
Right.
which are typically track 1 and track 2. The Deva is smart enough to know that if you're only routing a single track to, let's say, track 3, it's going to treat that as an ISO track.
Got it.
And the cool part about Deva, what Deva does is you name the input. And when you name the input, it simply takes that input name, and when it's an ISO, it makes it the track name automatically. Okay, and also there is a selection of preset track names, so you're not constantly typing in track names. If we go back to the overhead view.
And just to interject there for a second, I don't have to print all of the tracks. So in other words, if I print my 1 mix track, and then I guess the others would line up to be ISO tracks automatically, and then I'd get into the dedicated ISO tracks, Post would see only those tracks.
Well, that's right. It's going to automatically number the tracks based on whichever ISO tracks you select. So for instance, if you have your mix track and then you decide that ISO tracks, let's say 20 to 24 are the ones you want to send to post, you just disable those other tracks.
Got it.
And you'll simply have the mix track and then 5 ISO tracks. So it automatically takes care of all the housekeeping. You don't have to worry about it.
Good.
But the point is that if I come back here, if I wanted to name an input, I simply hold the shift key and touch the input, and it automatically goes into name input. And you'll see a button labeled presets. So if I touch the presets, here's all the preset names that I've put in.
Right.
So you're not constantly typing in names all the time. You're just grabbing a preset name, and away you go.
And certainly at the beginning of a show, you can go through the script and do this ahead of time.
Oh, absolutely, yeah. The nice part is, as you route inputs to ISO tracks, again, it automatically takes those names from the inputs and puts them on the ISO track.
Got it.
The other thing that it does, that if you have a mix track, there is a mix track name. So the moment that you take 2 ISO tracks and put them onto a mix track, you get the mix track name, and you can also name your mix track.
Beautiful.
Yeah, it's really simple. You just go into track mix, and if I, again, hold the shift and I touch the track name, it'll go into enter the track name.
That's great.
Yeah, again, like literally everything you can do on this, the moment you think of it, you can be there. You know, the touchscreen is literally that intuitive that, you know, when it comes to routing, assigning, naming, all the things you normally do, the mixer, the Deva, is not going to slow you down.
Along those lines of naming, is there a keyboard interface for this?
Yes, there is a standalone keyboard interface that should be out next month. There's a little module that you plug into a USB keyboard. It plugs into an unused serial port on the Deva, so if you just want to do that, you can do it. But what we do have coming out is the Zaxcom GUI, and the GUI basically runs on a PC or a Mac and allows you to basically do all the functions that you can do on the Deva. It's not simply meters and metadata. You can route through it. In fact, the software is tied into the Deva, so anything you can do on the Deva screen, you can do on the GUI. It's just that instead of being on a relatively small screen, you can have it on a much larger screen.
And what's the interconnectivity between the GUI computer and the Deva 24?
It is USB.
Okay.
Yeah. I mean, basically, we like USB because when you're on set, what you don't need is the uncertainty of Wi-Fi when you're sitting there on your sound cart and there's all this Wi-Fi going on the set. We need to make sure that, you know, you always have the most reliable interface that you have. Having said that, there actually will be a Wi-Fi dongle at some point, but we would prefer people utilize the USB.
Sure. So we've talked about inputs, we've talked about routing, we've talked about naming. So let's talk about mixing.
Okay.
Before we get into the control surface, how do I mix on the Deva 24 itself?
Well, the Deva 24 is actually really powerful because in a small package, if we go to the overhead view, you'll see there are 12 faders involved. You can assign these faders as actual faders for the channel. They can be input trims, and they can also be Zaxnet control, which we didn't talk about yet. So there's three things that we can do with it. So going into the menu, if I go into fader assign, right now I have two channels assigned to fader number 1. I have a single digital channel assigned to fader 2. So if I do want to assign a channel, I just touch the fader icon on the screen and I pick a channel that I would want to go to that fader. So right now digital 13 is going to go to fader number 3, and that's done as a fader. If I want, again, I can select trims. So maybe I want to take the trim for digital 13 and put it over here. So let's go back to digital 13 and I'll put that in. So now I've got the trim over here on this fader and I've got the actual fader up here on fader number 3. And again, like I said, you can go to Zaxnet, and through Zaxnet we can remote control the transmitters you know, through these knobs. So having 12 knobs that give you infinite flexibility in a relatively small package makes this absolutely the most powerful, you know, bag type mixer recorder. But what a lot of people do use this for is because people are using the external control surface.
Yes.
They might, for instance, set up the 12 knobs here all as Zaxnet. So that they can just reach up and, you know, not effectively, but they can actually control the preamps and the transmitters, you know, through these knobs while they utilize the mix surface for input trims as well as, you know, general fader activities.
And I think Zaxnet, it's important to talk about because it's really the first time, at least in this video, where we're starting to talk about a Zaxcom ecosystem.
Well, that's right. And
so what is Zaxnet?
Okay. Zaxnet is kind of like the Force. It just permeates everything. So that's my film side. Basically, what Zaxnet is, it is a transmission of data and audio. So you've got IFB audio, you've got remote control commands from both the control surface and the Deva 24, and you have time code. And that's all being transmitted at the same time on a specialized 2.4 gigahertz system. And all you need to do that is what we call the IFB 200. It's just a small little transmitter, connects directly to Deva 24, and it'll output all that information. What Zaxnet will do for you, it allows you to do many, many integrated things with our wireless system, so that you're able to remote control the gain of the transmitters during a live shot, okay, either from the knobs on the front of the Deva 24, or you can even route the Zaxnet control to the actual trim knobs on the Mix 16 or the Oasis control surface, which is our 8 and 16 fader control panels for the Deva 24. So the point about all this is it does you no good when someone overloads a wireless transmitter, which happens all of the time. I mean, you're in production, you're going to be hitting the limiter or compressor on the wireless transmitter.
Right.
How great is it that you can just sit at your sound cart, just dial it down a little bit, and then you're ready for the next take, without having to go out and touch the actor or do anything. Because the way people generally handle this is they have to either go out to the actor and fix it, or they'll try to fix it by bringing down the fader or bringing down the input trim. Right. None of these really help. Once you have limiter distortion, you have limiter distortion, you have compressor distortion. Right. And being able to remote control the transmitters is, it's just the most wonderful feature.
There's something called the RX-12.
Yes.
Which would also integrate in this system. RX-12 is a multi-coupler of receivers. I
like to think of it as 12 receivers, in a very, very elegant package.
And I can change frequency on the transmitters from the RX-12 and also change the gain from my recorder.
Well, that's right.
Zaxnet.
Yeah, if you want to take a look again at the recorder, I can go into the wireless menu with a single button, and what you're able to do is actually control 2 RX-12s at the same time. They would simply plug into the USB, and by going in here, I'm able to choose the mode of the receiver and the frequencies involved, and I can adjust them with the knob, or if I hit it again, it'll bring up a entry panel so I can just type in whatever I want to type in.
And that'll also broadcast it to the transmitter.
Well, that's right.
Yeah.
The system is smart enough to know which transmitter is going to that channel of receiver, because everything has an ID code, so that it knows what to do. It knows what transmitter to transmit that to. I mean, basically, everything is very professionally done so that you don't have situations where you try to remote control one transmitter and some nearby transmitter picks up the change, and all of a sudden what you have is a big unruly mess.
Right.
With this, it is very direct. It is from the sound cart. It is long range. I mean, the range of Zaxnet is hundreds of feet, depending upon your setup. I mean, if you have a little booster amplifier and a directional antenna, people control Zaxnet from 500 feet away. And I think that's a big difference versus other control schemes like Bluetooth that are really only good for about 4 feet. So what we end up here with, again, is a very practical integrated system that is going to really not let you down on set.
Now, the other thing that Zaxnet gets you is transport control, because the transmitters can also be recorders.
Well, absolutely.
And integrated playback from the transmitters.
That's right. With the Deva for many years, and this Deva will shortly have that capability, you're able to do what we call audition and re-record. And with the Zaxcom wireless system, you're recording in all of your transmitters. Okay, you're recording on your boom pole. Everything you would have would record. Everything is getting time code through Zaxnet. And I think the interesting part about that, Peter, is that the moment you switch a transmitter on, it receives the Zaxnet signal and it synchronizes its timecode generator. So every one of those body packs is subframe locked. There's no drift, there's no possibility of drift, there's no going out to the actors to jam them.
Right.
Those are just really unworkable scenarios. It has to be an automatic thing, which Zaxnet totally is.
But of course, Zaxnet also is able to control the transports, and so therefore I can also ask it to play back in sync.
Well, that's right. This is one of our nicest features. We call it Audition and Rerecord. When you're recording a scene, a take, it's important to be able to know that you have a backup of everything. And, you know, there's other reasons that we do this. I mean, basically, we like to be able to remix, and we like to be able to, you know, provide the ultimate in security of knowing you have the audio. So Audition and Rerecord allows us to take the transmitters, whether it be the body packs, the boom pole, any Zaxcom transmitter, because we're broadcasting time code to it, you know, all of these packs know what the time is in a subframe kind of way. So if you, on the recorder, go to any take that you previously have recorded, you're able to hit the audition key. All those packs out, you know, under control will queue up to the right time code point, and they will all then play back in sync. This is going to give the production sound mixer the opportunity to eliminate any transmission problems by re-recording them from the packs, re-recording the audio from the packs, as if the scene was being acted again live, and they're able to remix the audio as well. So you get the ultimate backup and the ultimate in creative mixing capability by being able to remix and re-record anything. And this is a much better backup than even if you had 10 backup recorders on the sound card.
Amazing, amazing.
Yeah, it's really, you know, it's really backing up the audio in the best possible place where you have a hardwired connection into the transmitter. So, you know, this is functionality that is just very, very unique to Zaxcom with Zaxnet control. What I also want to point out is Zaxnet allows us to do a few other things. It has the ability to do what we call power roll, where to save energy on our transmitters, because we can put them in a lower RF power output state remotely. If the recorder is in the stop mode, it'll actually power the units down to 25 milliwatts. And then when you go back into record during the actual take, it can power them up to 125 milliwatts depending upon the transmitter. So in this way, your batteries are going to last a lot longer, but yet you get the maximum transmission reliability
when you need it
during those takes.
That's
yeah,
right.
And
Yeah.
that's a, you know, that's another Zaxcom unique thing.
Cool. Speaking of Zaxcom unique things, NeverClip.
Okay, NeverClip. NeverClip is an invention that we came up with that extends the dynamic range of the input of our mixer recorders as well as our wireless transmitters. What we do is we take two A to D converters on every input, and we have one that is a general range converter as well as an extended range conversion. And we're able to take those two things and through a patented process, marry the data together.
So how does it work? Let's start just on the Deva 24 and then talk about how it might work with wireless or plug-ons.
It's really a similar process in both systems, where you take an input that generally would have a dynamic range of somewhere between 116 and 120 dB. Okay, that's what a standard A to D converter does. And it doesn't matter whether it's a 24-bit converter or a 32-bit converter. 32-bit converters are basically 24-bit converters with extra data bits that don't do anything.
Right. I mean, you're limited by the physics of the analog
it's
circuitry.
just kind of marketing fluff in the converter business. But in any case, so we take those converters and we marry them together to get extended dynamic range. The dynamic range of every mic pre in the Deva is 136 dB. Now, why is that important? It's important because, as actors do, they could be whispering one moment and they can be screaming the next. You simply don't know. If they're going to do that, generally speaking, if they're whispering, your gain is set high, and when they start to yell, you're going to hit a limiter or you're going to hit a compressor. And that's not going to sound very good. Okay? Or it might sound okay, but what it doesn't sound like is the original audio. So by extending the dynamic range to 136 dB, we totally eliminate that bottleneck at the mic pre. We're able to take in this very, very high dynamic range without any distortion of the audio.
Now, I totally get the mic pre side of it. The thing that confuses me is how do I squeeze that dynamic range onto a 24-bit track?
Well, that's really simple, okay? That's governed by the fader, okay? Once we get the audio into the recorder, okay, we're dealing with it in what we call floating point DSP math land, okay? So once we're in there, the dynamic range of that signal is effectively infinite. So the only thing that governs the audio is the fader itself, not any input trim or any input control. Because we have over 20 dB of headroom above the normal headroom that you have. So you're not going to clip the input of the Deva. And because inside the Deva, throughout all the audio paths, it can't clip either, you simply bring the fader down to a level that is going to work.
But okay, so that works for the mix track, but what about the ISO track?
On the ISOs, we've included something called ISO attenuation. And this allows everything to properly fit in the 24-bit file. The dynamic range of a 24-bit file is 144 dB.
Right.
Okay, that's just the way the math goes. If we have 136 dB of dynamic range, there's no problem using ISO attenuation to get that 136 dB to fit. Because what we do is, because we're extending the top by 20 dB, we actually attenuate the signal by up to 24 dB to use the unused noise bits that are normally in that 24-bit file. This works out perfectly. So that when the audio gets to post-production, if you've put in, let's say, 12 dB of ISO attenuation, all they have to do in post-production, if they want to use those ISO tracks, is just open up the fader another 12 dB.
Or increase the gain.
Increase the gain, yeah, in the consoles, you know, well, when I say console, in the playback, on the workstation, exactly. So you just increase that, and you're not bringing up any noise because we've eliminated the noise. We have totally taken it out by simply doing the ISO attenuation and pushing audio into where that noise is. So when they open up the gain in post-production, they're not bringing up noise, they're just bringing up signal content.
Interesting, and that's an optional setting.
It is an optional setting, that's right. It's, you can have no ISO attenuation. It goes in 6 dB steps. So it's, you know, 6, 12, 18, or minus 24 dB. And that's something that a production sound mixer would work out with their post-production department.
Absolutely.
Yeah, because, I mean, 24 dB is actually, you know, quite a bit. I recommend people go for 12 to 18 dB.
It's interesting. A lot of conversations I have with post-production dialogue editors, for example, often they feel like the isolated tracks are under-recorded anyways, and so they're always applying gain, or often applying gain to those tracks anyways.
Right.
So this is part of their workflow.
Yeah, I think ISO tracks are, you know, I mean, ISO tracks are what they are. I mean, they're supposed to be just as clean a track as you can get, no effects, no nothing.
Right. And certainly no overmodulation.
No overmodulation, because the one thing I can tell you is without NeverClip, okay, it doesn't matter whether your input is going to an ISO track or it's going to the mix track. Your ISO track doesn't help you fix that overmodulation or limiter or compressor distortion because it's got it too.
Right, garbage in, garbage out. If it's at the input, it's going to be everywhere else.
Right, but with NeverClip, you've got that ISO track without that compressor or limiter distortion, and the NeverClip system with Zaxcom recorders is the only way you can do that, you know, in any kind of practical way.
Yeah.
I mean, there's other, you know, some people record a lower level track, and then that just doubles the number of tracks for post-production, and then they have to go searching through twice the number of tracks.
Sure.
So that's not a very practical solution. It's more of a Rube Goldberg kind of way to mix. And NeverClip will give you a sensible way to extend the dynamic range and eliminate the compressor limiter distortion that is common, you know, basically with every other kind of recording system.
Fantastic. So the next thing I want to talk about, just working our way logically through the machine, is I want to make a recording with it. So tell me about what this records to.
Well, basically what we've done is we have standardized on the SSD drives. You just basically, right on the side of the machine, plug the drive in. We recommend SanDisk and Transcend drives. The Deva is now capable of handling a terabyte drive, so you can basically record almost a whole season on a single drive, depending upon the number of tracks that you're dealing with. So that would be your primary drive, and that drive records in what we call the MARF format. Actually, it's called MARF 2, which is our mobile audio recording format, which was really what got us into this business, because basically FAT32 systems, even today, have shown to be not reliable enough, well, let's put it this way, not reliable enough for us to utilize. We have a system where we can basically recover anything if anything went wrong. As long as we can read the drive, we can get the audio back. The MARF system embeds the directory into the audio files, so it makes it really simple to do that recovery. And if you were to lose power in the middle of a recording, you are never going to lose even a moment of audio. So there are so many customers over the last 20 years who have basically sent thank you letters saying how this system has totally saved them when something unexpected happened, like they would lose power in the middle of a recording.
Sure. Yeah.
The other thing about it is you can totally erase the drive. When I say totally, you can do a standard erase, wipe out the directory, and we can still play it back. And that has also saved a lot of people. So that's what MARF does. The mirror drives, there's two mirror drives. They're both compact flash slots. So you have redundant compact flash. You also have the ability to plug in SD card adapters into the compact flash. So if you wanted to record two SD cards simultaneously, you can do that as well. There is also a eSATA port on the Deva, and the eSATA port through the control panel will take the place of one of the compact flash drives. So we can record 3 medias at one time. And let me also mention that the Deva 24 actually has 3 DSPs in it, and it can record all 24 tracks to all 3 medias in real time. And in fact, if you want to mirror, let's say, yesterday's material while you're recording today's material, it can do that as well. And the mirror speed on this is probably at least 6 times faster than the old Deva.
Wow.
Yeah, so you can absolutely, mirror a whole day's material in, roughly 10, 15 minutes and hand it off to someone if they need another copy.
All while you're recording and mixing.
All while you're doing what you're doing right now.
That's great. Good.
So the recording system of the Deva 24 has really been brought into the 21st century.
Built for reliability. Let's talk about power.
Sure. Now this is a subject that is very important to me. If you look at a traditional sound card out there today, that may be one that's using a couple of recorders for redundancy, it's using a Yamaha mixer. I mean, that card could easily be drawing 10 amps at 12 volts. The power consumption of the Deva 24, as well as the mixing panel, the Mix 16, you're talking about just 1.5 amps for the whole thing. So the moment you add a few receivers to it, for instance, we're talking about 2 amps for our Mix 12. So basically, your entire cart for mixing, recording, and wireless is drawing only about 3.5 amps.
Wow.
Yeah, so it is very, very power efficient. And keep in mind, if you're only going to draw about 3.5 amps for that, and of course you need a little bit more for monitors or what have you, your battery size on the cart can be half as big.
Right.
So you're not hauling around 50 pounds of batteries on your cart.
Right, and less current means less heat too.
Well, absolutely, yes. The gear will stay cooler. The efficiency of it is, I think, unparalleled in this industry. So, it just makes it so much easier when you don't have power available that you're not going to, really be lugging around all this weight in
Plus
batteries.
The batteries, right.
Yeah, and even a battery half the size is probably going to last almost twice as long.
Sure.
Yeah, so it's a really nice thing when it comes to power consumption. Regarding power, we did not put any batteries in the Deva. Okay, We did that for a few reasons. Number one, we wanted the Deva to be as small as it could be. And if you look at the size of the Deva, it is comparable to our older Fusion product, but yet has all, more inputs and outputs and what have you. And it's comparable to things like the Nomad with its fader extender, or some of the other products that are out there. So you've got something that easily fits in a sound bag, is lightweight, so it is just absolutely a no compromise, whether you're in the bag or you're on the sound card. Everything is right there for you.
Now, one thing with recorders that have an internal battery is there's a power backup system in place. Is there something similar here?
Absolutely. What we've done is we've actually put 2 separate power inputs on this, and they are auto switching. See, what I don't want to do is run into a situation where you're using the battery, I don't want to say battery of the month or battery of the year, but it might even be battery of the decade, where we all are familiar with the old MP1s. Those are basically gone now.
Right.
We're using batteries from other manufacturers, but I don't know what battery is going to be out there next year, and neither do you. So this way you have the freedom to put any battery you want in here. You could even go to Home Depot and buy yourself a backup starter battery for a car. It's one of the little book-sized things, and you can use that. So typically speaking, you're going to plug the Deva 24 into your main cart power, but you might have a smaller backup battery that you plug into the auxiliary input so that you have your backup. The thing about putting batteries inside is batteries go bad. Okay, batteries explode. Batteries do bad things.
Yes,
okay?
They're left inside. There's all kinds
exactly.
of issues.
So, many a machine can get ruined from an accident with a battery, and that's not going to happen with the Deva because the batteries are simply outside the Deva.
Now, having said that, there's still backup batteries for time code and stuff like that.
Right. There's a coin battery inside, a little tiny battery. It won't run the unit, certainly, but it will keep time code accurate for over 24 hours. So you wouldn't have to re-jam. I mean, simply, you can turn the machine off, go to lunch, come back, and keep going, really. So,
awesome.
Yeah, it'll hold code, absolutely.
One of the unique things about this Deva 24 is that the faceplate is detachable.
Well, that's right, Peter. We wanted to do something very unique and something that I thought would be very, very helpful to our customer base. A lot of people walk around with mixers and wireless and very heavy bags right in front of them. And with this feature, we're able to just simply take the front panel. There's screws on the top and the bottom. It pulls right off. We're then able to remote it with a single cable. And as a remoted panel, you have all the controls that you would normally have. Plus, you can still plug in a slate mic and headphones right into the side of the panel.
Wow.
So everything is right there for you. And then you can take the body of the unit as well as wireless receivers, put it in a backpack, and away you go. And of course, you're able to control the receivers right from the Deva 24 panel. The other thing that's really quite nice is if you're out doing remote work, you're able to utilize the internal timecode slate so that you're simply showing this to the camera and you're doing your remote work and you don't need a separate timecode slate. And this is, of course, subframe accurate because it's part of the recorder.
Yeah.
Also updating over 30 times per second, so every frame is clearly shown in the video. So really quite
that's very cool.
Quite a nice feature.
Yeah. Awesome.
Cool.
So we've talked about the Deva 24, and now I would like us to talk about the Mix 16. First of all, let's start with what it is. It's a control surface. So what does that mean?
Well, basically, there's no audio actually inside the Mix 16. The Mix 16 simply is an interface for the Deva 24. Deva 24 contains an extremely powerful DSP-based audio mixer. As we talked about before, it's a floating point DSP engine, and it does all the mixing. It handles all the effects. It does everything when it comes to audio processing. So simply, the Mix 16 provides the handles for that mixer. It provides the faders, it provides the input trims, it provides routing, it provides communications, headphone monitoring, output levels. basically all the things that you need to do a proper mixing job on a sound card.
With a lot less cabling and a lot less power.
Well, that's right. If you want to talk about what makes this really great, is that you can take all kinds of audio sources, whether they be analog, AES, AES-42, Dante, whatever they happen to be, and you can bring them directly into the Deva 24. And the thing that makes this a really great solution is the Deva 24 has enough inputs so that you can actually use the Mix 16 to do your job in a reasonable way. Because with Mix 16, you get 16 faders, but you also have 16 motorized faders, so you're able to immediately change banks, as we call it.
All right, so let's see an example of that.
Well, very simply, right now I'm on bank 1. Bank 1 is controlling 16, I believe, digital inputs. If I simply go to bank 2, it takes those inputs that were on bank 1, puts them aside, it remembers those levels, so any fader that you had open on bank 1 will stay open. I can open these faders on bank 1, go to bank 2, and again, it remembers where it's at.
Sure.
So you can have your basic mixing channels on bank 1. You can actually go to the other banks, and you're able to take those banks, and you're taking even the same input. You can keep it on the same fader on multiple banks, only having certain faders change over to different channels, so that you have immediate access to things like your wireless microphones, your boom. Maybe you're doing a submix for someone who's coaching an actor. You can keep that on bank 2. Maybe you've got a music feed that you're sending out. You can have a fader on one of the other banks.
So are faders just limited to inputs? Can they control output levels?
Currently they're limited to input levels, and we're looking to expand that functionality in the future. But right now, basically, it's just one channel, any input channel to any fader without limitation. That's what we have right now. If you want to do grouping of things, like grouping of input trims or what have you, you can put that up currently on the knobs of the Deva itself.
Got it.
So again, going forward, we will have grouping on the faders, but we have to take care of a few other things first.
Sure. So take me through some of the features of this control surface.
Sure. Basically, again, we have our motorized faders. We have a little control strip, and what you get is an input meter on the strip, so I can see what the audio is. Right now I have a single microphone hooked up to channel 1, and we can see what we have coming in there level-wise. The buses that we feed are indicated by these two lights, track 1 and track 2, and if I hit the bus key, and you can see I just killed the buses, now I'm feeding just track 1, or I'm feeding track 2, or I'm feeding both of them. So it's very quick to route your main mix tracks just by hitting that button. We have PFL available, so I'm able to PFL any channel. And we also have PFL Molt coming out soon. Right now it's a single PFL, but you'll be able to mix together on the PFL bus if you would like to do that.
And again, my headphones are plugged into the Deva 24.
Well, that is correct, yes. Your headphones are always on the Deva 24.
No audio is going to the Mix 16.
That is correct. We do have an option for people if they want to bring the headphone through the actual panel and plug it in right on the front of the panel, but that's something that would be done on an individual basis.
Got it.
Yeah, that's a real mixed bag, because sometimes people shear them off because of the position, and then other people absolutely want them there. So,
sure,
anyway, so that's something we can certainly do. We also have the ability to control the EQ, the compressor limiter, which isn't typically used, certainly not on inputs. There's a high-pass filter enable key, notch filter 1, notch filter 2. You can set delay on any of the inputs. I didn't mention anywhere else, so I'll mention it now. You can also set delay for the outputs as well.
Nice.
Yeah, so if you want to put in a couple video frame delay on the outputs, you can do that. You've got phase inversion, and there's a shift key, which is currently, I think, non-active. Audition and Rerecord keys for the wireless Zaxnet functionality we talked about, and basically direct access to scene, take, and note, which duplicates keys that are right on the front of the Deva as well. The input trims are very versatile. Again, with those, you can select either trimming the input of the Deva or having them be a Zaxnet control so that you've got direct control of the transmitter's mic preamp. So that's another, again, Zaxnet kind of thing.
Great.
While we're talking about trims, because this is a question a lot of people ask me, whether your input is coming from an analog mic pre, or it's coming from the AES inputs, or it's coming from the eventual Dante board, the input trims work. So you can trim digital inputs. You can also EQ, compress, phase invert, notch. You can do anything to any analog or digital input. It does not matter.
We didn't mention any of those effects when
Correct.
we talked about the Deva 24, but I'd like to point out that you don't need the Mix 16 to access EQ and delay and all of that.
That is correct. The Deva has the same EQ that we've offered for many years, a really nice 3-band EQ with shelving filters, peak filter. So it's high shelf, low shelf, and peak, and you can change those for each of the 3 filters. And we also have 2 notch filters on every channel, and those come defaulted at 60 and 120 hertz. Very simple to change over to 50 and 100 for our friends in Europe
and the rest of the world. But it can be any frequency that you want.
It can be any frequency you want. So you've got the power on each channel to do what you need to do in the field. If you want to take those effects, set it up, let's say you want a little EQ on a certain lavalier or a certain microphone, you could also copy those effects from any channel to any single channel or group of channels.
And sometimes when you get into DSP, there's a kind of fuel gauge. Will I ever run out of DSP power? Can I have EQ on everything?
You can have everything everywhere. You can have all cross points in. Again, because this has 3 DSPs, the architecture is this. You've got a audio DSP that does all the mixing, all the effects. You've got a front panel DSP that controls all the, basically the entire screen and all the buttons on the panel and what have you. And then you've got a recording DSP that does nothing but take the audio data that is ready to lay down and puts it onto the 3 medias simultaneously. So that's how we've split it up. And again, this has been just fabulous as far as the speed of the machine and the reliability of, basically the thing always being ready to record, always recording, in real time. You can still mirror as we mirror backup-wise.
Yeah, I mean, even just playing with it here, one thing that struck me is the responsiveness of it.
Yeah, it's crazy.
There's no latency that I've noticed in terms of I push something and you wait.
Well, that's right. Everything is real time. And a function that we do have coming out that we didn't talk about is Mix Ahead. Mix Ahead is actually to take care of response time of the Deva, because there are a few milliseconds in there, as well as human response time. So it allows the mixer to get ahead of the audio so that by the time you hear something and move the fader, you actually are on time as opposed from late, because there's no way for you to realize that someone just started to scream and then you get your hand on the fader and bring it down as quickly as possible. You're still going to be a little late, and with Mix Ahead, you can be right on time. And that's something that you can turn it off. You can set it to as many milliseconds as you like. Again, a very unique Zaxcom feature.
Is there anything that post-production has to do with Mix Ahead?
No, nothing. It's totally transparent to post-production. They wouldn't even know it's there, other than the mix would be. If you set it up right, it'll be a better mix. Even if you decide to go for 30 milliseconds, which is 1 video frame's worth of delay, it's only going to get you closer to a real-time thing if you have to react to something.
Right.
Because you never know what's out there. So again, trying to make a product that does things that are just totally unexpected that will be helpful to you. I mean, this is kind of how NeverClip got going, because we thought, this might be a nice feature, so let's put this in, and we had no idea how viral it would go with our customer base.
What other parts of the MIX-16 would you like to show us?
Well, basically, on the MIX-16, we have 8 pots here, which are all output level pots. So if you're feeding music to someone or feeding someone's IFB earpiece, you're able to trim the level on all the output buses. You've got your headphone adjust right here, as well as 3 headphone presets that you can select. And you can set this up on the Deva so that they can be anything you want to listen to, any number of inputs or what have you. So you've got the 3 presets. You have your communications section with the built-in slate mic. You can talk to 2 outputs that you can, again, route anywhere you want to route.
You can also have an external slate mic as well.
Absolutely, yes. Okay. Yeah, basically you can plug in the external slate mic right into the Deva, and you would set that up through the Deva's touchscreen. And you also have a slate button, so that if you want to slate the track, you just hit the button, slate it, let it go, and there you are. And of course, we've got the transport controls, record, stop, and play. So very simple to roll here. There's actually also, speaking of rolling, there is a general purpose output on the Deva, so that you're able to remote roll a separate recorder if you have a separate backup recorder.
Well, that's an interesting segue.
I fed you that one.
Yeah,
I was right there.
It's a softball.
I was right there.
One of my criticisms of Control Surface, and not just mine, but others, is how do you have a backup recording? But I think you have a unique solution for that.
Well, yes. I mean, certainly, the best way to have a backup recording is to have it in our wireless. However, if you're going to use a more conventional backup recording, the Deva has what we call AES direct outs. So when you hook up your analog sources to the Deva, they're actually digitized and sent out what we call AES direct outs. And there's actually 16 of those outputs. So with those outputs, you're able to plug it into a backup recorder. And the nice part about this is you can record your ISOs that way. You can take a mix from the Deva. And not that we have ever seen this, but if you did have any kind of recording issue on the Deva, all you need is power on the Deva, and you're going to get those direct outs. There's no processor intervention with that. So again, what we're trying to do is to absolutely bulletproof the system where there is no chance, or we want there to be no chance, that you're going to lose anything or have no record of the audio.
I think that's a really important point for people.
Yeah, it is something that we're very proud of. Another thing that I didn't mention earlier, just talking about AES, every AES input has sample rate conversion. So all of the inputs, and there are actually 12 connections for the 24 channels, every connection can have its own isolated sample rate from 16 kilohertz to 196. So, there's never going to be any kind of sampling issue.
You're not worried about clocking? Or
no, you don't have to have word clock connections. You don't do any of that.
Right.
This is as simple as it can be. And I think that, especially when you want to talk about control surfaces, the fact that you're taking your audio, whether it's analog audio, digital audio, going right into the Deva, and it's all there, I mean, that is just so comforting, because you're not running audio into a mixer recorder. I'm sorry, not mixer recorder, into a mixer, mixing it there, and then getting all those ISO tracks and the mix to another device.
Well, it's a rat's nest of cables with all the potential ground loop issues and RFI issues.
The simplicity of it, the reliability of it.
They go hand in hand.
Well, exactly right. And, I think that you take all of those things, you combine it with the size, you combine it with the power consumption, the simplicity of the interface, okay, and we haven't even talked about the external GUI, because we have an external GUI. We'll talk about that a little bit. We've been doing this for 20 years, okay? Nothing you see here is something we came up with in the last year or two. I mean, everything is based on our history, since like 1998 of making file-based recorders. And, we think that this system, has no equal. It literally, on almost any metric you can put on this, it just, it's got the reliability, it's got, size, power consumption, and besides, it's, it's on your sound card, it's going to look nice.
I think we've seen how all of this works well together, works amazingly well together. It's an integrated system. I think it's important also to point out to viewers that obviously with the exception of the Mix 16, you can buy into any one of these components and they'll work terrific on their own.
Well, that's right, Peter. I think what we try to do at Zaxcom is to focus on each product individually, to give each product a feature set and build quality that allows it to stand on its own in a way that is hopefully, as good or better than anything on the market today. So if you're going to use, let's say, the Deva 24 with some other mixer, could be a Yamaha, could be a Sonosax, could be anything, whether it's analog or digital, it doesn't matter. If you connect the Deva to it, you're going to have an ultra reliable recorder that has all the features you need to do your job and produce great sounding audio. Again, with the wireless, yes, there are many, many great features that you have with the integration of Zaxnet enabled transmitters, but you're definitely, there's definitely no reason for you not to consider a Zaxcom Deva recorder because you're not using Zaxcom wireless.
That's great. Thank you very much, Glenn, for taking the time. I really appreciate it. I'm really excited about this.
Thank you, Peter.
Yeah.
We are too.
Thanks to the crew. Thanks for watching. Visit the video archives at gothamsound.tv. Follow us on Facebook and Twitter for the latest news. And please send ideas or questions to info@gothamsound.com. Thank you.